England is currently in the grip of what can only be described as a combination of a far-right racist riot, a pogrom, and a terrorist insurgency. Now, you are not being told the truth about what's actually happening by most of our politicians and our media outlets. That is because some of those who are currently denouncing this uprising have played key roles in whipping it up. The truth is, our political and media establishments have spent the last 2 decades in particular whipping all this up. They did this. This is on them, and we need to hold them to account. And I'm going to show you in this video exactly what they've done. Now, first of all, solidarity, endless solidarity with British Muslims and people of colour of all faiths and none, many of whom feel fear leaving their homes right now, all too many who don't even feel safe in their own homes as far-right extremists rampage around, throwing petrol bombs, any missiles they can, designed to injure, maim, and to kill. Now, I've been abroad, hence the silence, but normal service now resumes. This video is based on a lengthy thread I've written on Twitter with the receipts, but it's helpful to be equally clear about what happened, how we got to this point on this platform, because unless we understand that, we won't be able to stop this horror from happening, continuing and happening again. Now, as our politicians presided over crumbling public services, the trashing of secure jobs, an ever-escalating housing crisis and falling living standards, it was oh so convenient for both political elites and media outlets to whip up anti-migrant hostility. So we didn't blame or hold responsible those who are actually in charge, those who are at the top of society, for all the problems that afflict this nation. Now, the supposed spark for this insurgency was the horrific killing of 3 girls in Southport. The suspect is British born, he's not Muslim, he's not an asylum seeker who recently arrived by boat. These are all claims which widely circulated and were used as the justification. And do you know what? If he was any of those things, it wouldn't have been a justification in any case for what happened. That anti-migrant hostility that I'm discussing, however, which is now on the rampage, specifically merged with Islamophobia a long time ago. And that has been incessantly whipped up since 9/11 in particular. British Muslims have been treated as dangerous and disloyal foreigners in their own land, while migrants and refugees who are Muslim are treated as hostile invaders. Let's begin with the now opposition Conservative Party. Tory Islamophobia is rampant and it is institutional. Baroness Saida Varsi, the most prominent Muslim Tory politician, warned long ago and over again that it was a problem from top to bottom in the Conservative Party. She told me personally that Michael Gove had played a key role in driving it, and she told me that back in 2019. When Sadiq Khan ran for London Mayor and became Europe's most senior Muslim politician, the Conservative Zach Goldsmith, who ran against him for London Mayor, ran a poisonous Islamophobic campaign against him. Since then, Sadiq Khan has been an obsessive target for the Islamophobic right. When Boris Johnson, then Tory politician before he became Prime Minister, compared Muslim women wearing the veil to letterboxes and bank robbers, there was a 375% surge in hate crimes against British Muslims. Far-right extremists embraced Boris Johnson when he became Prime Minister. Far-right thugs on the streets chanted, "We love you, Boris." I was there when they did it. And Tommy Robinson and Britain First, whose chief targets are Muslims, personally endorsed him as Prime Minister. The Conservative MP, Nusrat Ghani, claimed after she was sacked as a Tory minister that she said it was because her Muslim faith was making colleagues feel uncomfortable. She said that's what she was told. Now, after a Tory inquiry cleared the chief whip, who she accused of making these comments, of rule breaking, Ghani allies said they feared a cover-up. There was relentless evidence of Conservative councillors posting anti-Muslim bile online. Many of them were suspended and later quietly reinstated. Polling repeatedly shows that the Tory membership is viciously Islamophobic. More than half of Tory members think Islam is a threat to the so-called British way of life, while over half believe conspiracy theories about parts of European cities being under Sharia law and so-called no-go areas. Protests over Israel's genocide have brought Tory Islamophobia to the fore. Explaining why there were so few arrests over protests against this genocide, Suella Braverman, former Home Secretary, claimed it was because Islamists were in charge in Britain, rather than the actual, real, honest answer for why there are so few arrests, which is because protests were overwhelmingly peaceful and there was no reason to arrest people. Lee Anderson, the former deputy chair of the Conservative Party, did have the Tory whip belatedly removed after claiming Sadiq Khan was under the control of Islamists, but notably, Tory MPs came to his defence. Lee Anderson, of course, defected to Reform and is now Reform MP for Ashfield. Back in the 2016 referendum over the European Union, the official Leave campaign was dominated by Conservatives, and it was unapologetically and flagrantly Islamophobic. The campaign falsely claimed Turkey was about to join the European Union and that Brits were at risk from Turks. One Leave EU poster highlighted 5 supposed soon-to-be EU members. 8 years on, none of them have joined. It then highlighted Syria and Iraq on the map. Not so much a dog whistle as a foghorn. Nigel Farage was notoriously responsible for the most incendiary intervention, standing in front of a poster of Syrian refugees with the slogan, "Breaking Point." He later warned he'd don khaki, pick up a rifle, and head for the front lines if Brexit wasn't delivered. The Brexit campaign was fought overwhelmingly on immigration, with Islamophobia a strong theme. So little wonder bigots were emboldened. They felt they were emboldened after the result, and celebrated the result with hate crimes, often with Muslims as targets. Nigel Farage, an ally, of course, of Donald Trump, an Islamophobic pin-up, declared just this year that growing numbers of British Muslims don't share what he described as British values. But Labour too, now the governing party, has its own outrageous record in Islamophobia. Its own involvement in the calamities of Iraq and Afghanistan, in which hideous war crimes are committed against Muslims, radicalised some Muslims. This radicalisation was then explained as inherent to Islam. This is a really critical point. We have never come to terms with the consequences of Western violence in predominantly Muslim lands, like Iraq, like Afghanistan, like, of course, Palestine today. That violence, that huge violence, of course it has consequences. It has radicalised a certain number, a minority. Of course that exists. But that is then explained as being something to do with Islam, therefore turning all Muslims into supposed menaces, violent threats, potentially. And that's because that context is stripped away, because then we would have to hold to account those responsible for that violence. Now, the so-called war on terror meant increased police powers and anti-terror legislation, which disproportionately targeted and also stigmatised young Muslim men in particular. Labour's Prevent programme has been described as a thought police targeting Muslims in this country. When in 2006, the Labour Cabinet Minister Jack Straw declared he was uncomfortable with veil-wearing Muslim women, which he called a visible statement of separation and of difference, it triggered an avalanche of Islamophobia in the media, as well as reported linked hate crimes against Muslims. Labour's immigration minister, Phil Wallace, ran a vile Islamophobic campaign against the Lib Dems in the 2010 election, and notoriously, shamelessly attacked the Lib Dems as wanting to give rights to illegal immigrants, as it put it, so-called illegal immigrants, which is not how you should speak about human beings, who were clearly in that leaflet presented as Islamist extremists. The emails that were then revealed, exchanged between his campaign team, included calls to make the white vote angry by going hard on the, in quotes, militant Muslim angle. After his election win was overturned in the courts on the grounds he'd lied about his opponents, Labour MPs rallied to his defence. In the aftermath of the Brussels terrorist attack, the former Labour Prime Minister Tony Blair declared many millions of Muslims had an outlook that is fundamentally incompatible with the modern world. Now, this is important. When Tony Blair called for the West to ally with Vladimir Putin against Islamist extremism, it was revealing both had overseen mass slaughters of Muslims from Iraq to Chechnya and had a shared incentive in portraying Muslims as a violent rabble. What then of Labour more recently? It's not commented on enough. Jeremy Corbyn was often demonised for his perceived proximity to Muslim communities, portrayed as they were as hotbeds of anti-Semitism and extremism. In the 2021 Batley-Innsmouth by-election, Keir Starmer's Labour unashamedly embraced Islamophobia. A Labour official briefed that Muslim voters were turning on the party because Keir Starmer was challenging anti-Semitism. In other words, the claim was that Muslim voters were anti-Semitic. After Labour narrowly won in Batley and Spen in 2021, that by-election, a campaign source bragged they'd built a new coalition, losing the Conservative Muslim vote over gay rights and Palestine while winning 2019 Tory voters. Now, I went to Batley and Spen and I spoke to campaigners, canvassers on all sides, including, of course, the Labour Party. Gay rights never came up on the doorstep. Not one person reports that coming up. But what that briefing did is try to present the idea that British Muslim voters hated gay people so much that they wouldn't vote for Keir Starmer, which made no sense because in the heyday of New Labour, when actually to their credit they introduced gay rights, Muslim voters overwhelmingly voted for the Labour Party, or sort of Keir Starmer, who's done nothing on the issue of LGBTQ rights at all. Muslim vote support has collapsed. So clearly there was no link there whatsoever. Now, after broadcaster Trevor Phillips was suspended from Labour before Starmer's victory as leader of the Labour Party for referring to Muslims as a nation within a nation, Starmer's Labour went on to reinstate it, sending a very clear message about their stance on Islamophobia. In 2019, the former Blair advisor Philip Collins wrote that Labour's anti-Semitism was a much bigger problem than Tory Islamophobia, clearly presenting a hierarchy of racism. He went on to become Keir Starmer's personal speechwriter for his conference speech. Now, after Keir Starmer hired esteemed black barrister Martin Ford KC, after leaked abusive messages from Labour officials, Ford exposed a hierarchy of racism in the Labour Party, in which, as he put it, anti-black racism and Islamophobia is not taken as seriously as anti-Semitism by Labour. Now, Martin Ford KC went on to declare that Labour wasn't engaging with this hierarchy of racism. Clearly, his report was not taken seriously at all. Meanwhile, a poll by the Labour Muslim Network in 2022 found a quarter of Muslim members had experienced Islamophobia, and a third of Muslim members had witnessed it within the context of the Labour Party. Now, crucially, 39% of Muslim Labour members and supporters strongly disagreed that Labour represented the Muslim community. That's shocking. Strongly disagreed. Bear in mind, they're Muslim Labour supporters. 39% disagreed as well. So the majority just didn't think Labour represented them. Just 12% agreed and 5% strongly agreed that Labour represented the Muslim community. The polling specifically found that even by 2022, before Gaza, this current horror in Gaza, Labour Muslim supporters' trust in Starmer had already collapsed. They showed, the polling, that Labour Muslim voters and supporters didn't think Keir Starmer took Islamophobia seriously enough. Now, when largely Muslim Labour councillors quit Labour in disgust at Labour support for Israel's genocide, one Labour source briefed that the party was, quote-unquote, shaking off the fleas. And Labour's contempt for the value of largely Muslim Palestinian life, well, that couldn't have been any clearer. After Labour gutted a SNP motion holding Israel to account for collective punishment, both the Speaker and Labour spread the message that it was because of threats to Labour MPs' safety. This was widely understood as meaning Muslim protesters, triggering a wave of Islamophobia, supposedly dangerous, threatening Muslim protesters. In the 2024 election, Labour support amongst Muslim voters, normally a core Labour vote, went into collapse. In the 21 constituencies where 30% or more of the population are Muslim, the Labour vote dropped from an average of 65% in 2019 to just 36% in 2024. Labour was defeated by 4 independent candidates in communities with large Muslim populations. After Labour lost white voters in the Red Wall, it promised to listen and to learn, but this time it responded by claiming the party had been cheated. Well, that had consequences. You see, by claiming it had lost because of bullying and harassment, claims it has failed to substantiate, Labour fueled a toxic image of dangerous and threatening Muslims. Whether protesting or voting supposedly the wrong way, Muslim engagement in the democratic process has been demonised by the Labour Party. Now, it's striking too that when Labour suspended candidate Faiza Shaheen, it raised her speaking out about Labour's Islamophobia as part of the supposedly damning evidence, sending a very striking message. As well as our political elites, our media outlets have systematically fanned Islamophobic bile. A 2019 study found that 59% of media coverage of Muslims was negative. That rose to 78% with the Mail on Sunday. Now, in 2011, a Daily Star journalist resigned after revealing that the newspaper deliberately got its reporters to lie about Muslims, stoking up hatred. When the Sun newspaper did a front page splash deceiving its voters by claiming 1 in 5 Muslims had sympathy for jihadis like ISIS, it was forced to print a correction, but only months later and on page 2. When the Times did front page splashes about Christian child forced into Muslim foster care, it stoked Islamophobic bigotry. The copy emphasised white Christian child. It was forced to print a correction months later, but of course the damage had already been done. These are just two examples of anti-Muslim deceit whipped up by a newspaper with devastating consequences. The truth is the British press has been whipping up anti-Muslim bile for years, portraying Muslims as a dangerous and a hostile enemy within. Britain is a cauldron of resentment because, brutally speaking, social progress ground to a halt after the 2008 financial crash. A life has been defined by insecurity for millions. Whipping up Islamophobia in that context has redirected anger with devastating effect. The truth is, Islamophobia is rampant, mainstream and respectable in this country. That's how we've ended up with 3 hideous murders in which the suspect, who isn't even Muslim, not that the current horror would be acceptable if he was, has led to an Islamophobic pogrom. Our mainstream politicians and media outlets have whipped up and made Islamophobia respectable for a very long time, helping to radicalise a significant level of the population who increasingly believe that they have a licence to act on their hatred. Yes, Elon Musk and Twitter are clearly playing their role. Musk's platform has been overrun by far-right fanatics, and he's personally helping to whip up this insurgency, from spreading lies about two-tier policing to declaring civil war in Britain is inevitable. But those focusing on Musk and social media at the exclusion of other factors are doing so because they know it would expose their own responsibility. Right now, of course, Muslims are not the only target. All people of colour have been placed at heightened risk. Many now feel scared to leave their homes. Many don't even feel safe in their homes. The rest of us have a responsibility to show meaningful solidarity. Those believing far-right extremism can be defeated by the justice system are at best delusional. This is a political problem. A racist British establishment which delights in finding scapegoats for problems it causes is to blame. They did this. This is on them. Now, many of the so-called centrists applauded Starmer's victory on the grounds that politics would become boring again and a lost normality would return. A month ago, Anna Soubry, a former Tory minister turned cheerleader for Keir Starmer, tweeted, "Is it just me, but suddenly everything feels ... normal. No more psychodramas and scandals. Like the grown-ups are back in government and people can get on with their lives watching politics out the corner of their eyes. Safe." Now, those who tweeted or said those sorts of things, they just do not understand the turmoil in British society. For them, it was simply a case of these vulgar, embarrassing politicians who ran the country and just sensible people could take over and all would be well. They don't understand that this country has been in turmoil for a long time, including because of the policies supported by those that they believe to be the sensible moderates. Now, we need 2 things. We need an all-out war on racist scapegoating, which means taking on our media and our political establishments. We also need an all-out war on economic and social insecurity, which far-right extremists exploit by redirecting anger at all the wrong targets. But finally, a message for the far-right extremists terrorising Muslims and people of colour in this country. You're going to be defeated. You're going to lose. Your hatred of a society that is diverse and inclusive will never match our determination to fight for one that truly is. You feel that you have lost your country, and you are right. You have. You want to restore the past. Well, as the phrase goes, the past is a foreign country. They do things differently there. The England of the past put children up chimneys, made workers toil 96 hours a week, deprived women of the right to vote and much else, dictated who we were allowed to love, made people pay for their healthcare, crowded people into dirty slums, and yes, openly celebrated its whiteness. People fought at great cost to fight those injustices, and yes, today our elites impose all sorts of injustices on this country. This is, after all, a wealthy society, where wealth is concentrated in the hands of a few, while millions of all faiths and none, of all ethnicities, are condemned to insecurity and hardship as a choice because of a broken economic system rigged in favour of a tiny elite. But across this country, people of all backgrounds live together, work together, sleep together, build families together. And yes, there are divides, profound divides. And yes, there is institutional racism, which imposes injustice and suffering on the lives of all too many minorities. But there are many millions of us determined to change that. And as you inflict terror on our streets, you will only strengthen our resolve to free this country of the racism that you relish and you thrive on. We will defeat your hate, and we will hold to account those who enabled you all this time without being challenged. That's going to change. Please like and subscribe. Do leave your thoughts and your comments as ever. Listen to us on the podcast. Keep the show on the road at patreon.com/OwenJones84. And we'll be having many more videos, coverage, interviews with people, the voices you need to hear right now to come. See you soon.